Okay, hello everyone. So this is the finished quilt sitting on my counter. And I pretty much did what Bethanne Nemesh, the designer of this pattern, I guess. It was an online class. So you see the double cross hatching in the outer border, the molar teeth in the white, the circles, and the echoing and the sashing. And on this bottom heart, I decided to do broken glass. It's called, I think, broken glass or wedges. It's Carly Porter background fill design. It's just really cool. I thought broken glass with the heart, kind of like a broken heart. I don't know. I thought it would look cool, and I think I really like it. So I did the scribbling around each of the feathers. See the tight scribbling there. Just makes the feathers themselves pop a little bit more. Some curved cross hatching in the center. And then this heart. This background design is kind of a combination McTavishing and Carly curls. And I love how that turned out. The curls intermixed with these little C shapes with the funky lines, which is indicative of the McTavishing. And again, scribbling around the outside to super define each of the, just turned out so cool. I love it. And then up here, this is a beautiful heart. This is the heart that I screwed up, guys, or just, you know, didn't do as well as I thought. And see, there's the wonkiness and the cross hatching. And then I had started out and I had made this too tight, and so I just did it on the other side too, and you'd really have to look for that. So again, you know, I could have taken it out, but looking from here, you really got to look for that, the funkiness. And as I'll point out in the detail, you'll see me quilt this block. I had my machine on manual mode, or not stitch regulated, and I thought that some of these stitches were kind of long and made it look a little more not as perfect as I would have liked them to. But again, you look at it from out here and it looks fine, right? So again, don't be hard on yourself when you do something you think might not be perfect, because this turned out nice. Now in this heart, I just did a plain echo around each sawtooth. I didn't scribble like I did down here. See that scribbling? And then here I just echoed, and looks a little different depending on which look you like. Okay, so this block is pretty much how Beth has it shown in her class sample. She doesn't show you how to quilt it in her class, so I decided to go ahead and do that. And so if you watch my video, you'll see how I did that. Again, this is this background is in her blended textures class. It's a lengthy class. It's kind of expensive, but it's so worth it. She has some really cool backgrounds, and this is just one example of the backgrounds that she offers. So, and then that's it. In her class, you learn how to do these cool scallop borders and how to sew those pieces together without going crazy, and how to get the corners to match up. So it's actually quite simple, and I'm only saying that because she's an excellent teacher. So again, there you have it. My 2023 Valentine's Day quilt. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. So hello again. Thanks for hanging in there with me. So this is the first of the two blocks that you'll see me quilt. And I am using Bethanne Nemesh's Love Lines heart templates. There are 3 of them. Love Lines 3, which is what this one is, and then a 2 and a 1. The 3 is the biggest, the 2 is the middle, the 1 is the smallest. But you can quilt this block, all 4 of these blocks, without one of those, without any of those templates. You can wing it and just mark it by hand. Heart shape is pretty easy. Or you can draw on some cardstock or a manila folder or some cardboard and draw a nice shape, cut it out, and use that as a guide to draw on your fabric with a water-soluble or air-soluble pen, and then just stitch the drawn line without the aid of a ruler. So don't feel like you have to have these rulers in order to do this. So here I am quilting the feathers, and having done the inside of that side, I'm going to use the same heart shape Love Lines number 3, the biggest template, to do an echo coming back down, because I'm going to quilt the outside feathers, and I want to do that the same as before, so I'm going to start at the bottom. So use your template and just angle it, move it a little bit so you can start and end at the same point for both lines. And at the widest, you have about a 1/4 inch echo. You can use the template or not. Sometimes I use the template, sometimes I just wing it, because by the time you add all the other elements to this block, you're going to be really hard pressed to see any irregularities in that little stem of the heart. So I like that Bethanne chose these sawtooth feathers, because they do kind of mimic hearts. What I just drew with an air erase pen is an outline of how far out I want these petals to go, so that I end up coming back in to a point, so I can do the other side. So that's just a little guideline. Sometimes I draw them, sometimes I don't. In this case, I'm a bit rusty with free motion, so I decided to go ahead and draw it and make sure I ended up where I needed to. So we're almost back at the beginning. So now we're gonna stitch in the spine of the other side of the heart. You're gonna have 3 spines there. So we're gonna do the biggest one first, again with the biggest heart template. And we're gonna just kind of overstitch our way out to our starting point. Again, the templates are lined up. There's a crosshair on the template, and you're going to draw crosshairs on your fabric. Try and, I found the center point of my block, and then made sure those crosshairs crossed at the center point. So we have the largest outline of that side. Now I'm using the Love Lines 2 ruler, the middle size heart ruler, and I'm going to overstitch or backtrack up to my starting point there and go up to the top and bump right into the edge of the feather. So it looks like that heart outline is disappearing under the feather. It's such a cool effect. And I'm getting my smallest of the 3 heart templates, lining that up, crosshairs on the template with the crosshairs on the fabric, backtracking down to my starting point, and coming to an end at the feather at the bottom. So it looks like those 3 lines at both the top and the bottom just kind of disappear behind those feathers. It's a really cool effect. So I'm gonna fill in with some just a background fill. So I want to differentiate or just give a border to my feathers, and in this case I chose to do an echo. And whatever fill you use, make sure it's significantly smaller than what your feathers are, so that you get that defined difference, and that's what will help define your feathers. Where if your pebbles were all the same size right next to the feathers, it would be hard to be able to differentiate between the feathers and the background fill. So this fill in the center is just a variety of different pebble designs. Small, medium, and large pebbles, pebbles with swirls, triple circles, just a variety of different pebble designs. On the outside of the heart, I went ahead and used one of Bethanne's blended background textures. I didn't fill that. You won't see me fill that because she's still teaching that class. So, and it's an extensive class. So I don't want to take away from her thunder. So if you're interested in her unique, really awesome fill designs, take a look at her class. I'll put a little blurb on the screen a little later. So what I'm doing now is scribbling between, I didn't like the echo. I thought that was just not enough definition. So now I'm going back and scribbling. And scribbling for me is just really, really teeny tiny overlapping circles. You want to overlap these circles. Some people do figure eights. Some people do back and forth lines. I do overlapping circles, but whatever works for you, you just want to thread paint that area so that it looks squished down, and in this case a little bit darker because that thread is a little darker than the outline. So that's going to be about it for this block. Again, she does not show this in her class, so I thought you guys might enjoy seeing how I quilted that heart. I'm showing you a little scribble on the outside just to remind myself to tell you that you can scribble before you add any fills, or you can go ahead and scribble after you put your fill in. It really doesn't matter, before or after, it doesn't matter. Scribbling is a wonderful way to hide any flaws, if of course you have those. Okay, so this block was actually the first block that I quilted of the 4 blocks on this piece. And you'll see how rusty I am. I put robotics. I got a second long arm, and I have robotics now on both my long arms, and haven't really done much free motion quilting in a while. I kind of gotten lazy. Well, maybe not lazy. I've had a ton of fun playing with my robotics and learning what all that can do. And oh my God, it's a whole different world. So one of the reasons I decided to do this piece was the vast majority of it is done free motion and with ruler work, that I haven't done it extensively in a long time. So my feathers are really far apart. There's quite a few gaps. There's quite larger than normal gap between the feathers. Anyway, so I kind of not, if you don't do free motion quilting regularly, you kind of, at least I kind of lost my mojo. So in this block, I'm getting it back. I am using 40 weight thread, and in the previous block I used 40 weight polyester glide for both the heart, the feathers, and the fill, and it worked out just fine. There wasn't much thread buildup at all. In this block I'm using 40 weight thread, more or less a matching thread for the heart and the feathers, And frankly, if I were to do this block over again, I would go with a darker color. The fabric in this block is so busy that the stitching of the heart, the quilting of the heart, and these feathers just kind of gets lost. It shows up great in this video, especially the finished block in the beginning, because I had just the right lighting. But generally, without that just right lighting, this block just, the stitching in this block kind of disappears. So if I were to do it again for the heart and for the feathers, I would use a darker thread, maybe a chocolate brown to match the sashing and the brown in the borders. So now what I'm doing is lining up the crosshairs in the template with the crosshairs on my fabric, and I'm using the smallest of the three heart templates because in this heart I want a large space between the inner and outer heart lines. It's how Bethanne has it in her design, and I really liked it, so I went with it. And again, this is 40 weight polyester thread. This quilt, I'm using a high loft wool batting, Quilter's Dream Wool, which is a high loft batting, and that's what makes those feathers pop, especially when you use such a dense fill in all the blocks like I'm doing in this quilt. It gives you a trapunto look with without all the extra trapunto work. So high loft, yeah. All right, so what's next is the cross hatching inside this inner heart, inside the smaller heart. And I got to tell you, I haven't done free motion ruler work cross hatching probably in a couple years now. So this heart is going to look super bad. And you'll see me wobble on the bottom here. That wobble is because I didn't see how the presser foot just lifted up off the ruler. That created that wobble. And then I had in my head that I was going to do a 1/2 inch distance between my lines, and then on the fly decided, nope, I want a smaller distance, so a 1/4 inch. So now I have a big gaping empty spot, or more open spot. I just didn't have it together when I crosshatched this. But, ladies and gentlemen, I did not take it out. Don't take out things that you don't feel are perfect. There's really no need for that. I will say this piece I'm doing for myself. So, see the big gap in the bottom there? Now you have several options when you do something like that. You can either fill it in with a line, if you can get a line just right in the middle of it. That's one option. The other option is to quilt something in there. Put feathers, put cross hatching, put pebbles, but quilt something in there. Quilt a line of swirls in there. Something that makes it look intentional. In this case, it worked out that I was able to put a stitch line right in between, and it matched my other lines, maybe a little denser at the bottom. So when I do the cross hatching on the other side, I'm going to make that a little denser on the bottom. If you do something once, it can be looked at as a mistake. If you repeat it once or twice, it's a design feature. So whatever, right? Life is too short to be ripping out stitches. So oh, what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. If you, a really good teacher for cross hatching, if you want to learn and get really, really comfortable with cross hatching, is Forever Quilting with Dori Harushka. She has a mandala class. That's an ongoing class. And the first 6 months of this class is all about cross-hatching, learning how to do it properly, easily, without a ton of thread breaks or backtracking. Is really, really worthwhile to take that if you plan on doing a lot of cross-hatching and don't want to get bogged down by it. Okay, moving on. So another kind of less than ideal thing that I did with this block was I switched to non-regulated or manual mode, and I had set my stitch length too short. Now in this echoing, again, I'm going to echo to define the space around my feathers, and that just makes it easier to do the background fill. It gives you a solid line to bump against when you're doing background fill. But if you look at this, I am using 100 weight thread. I switched to a thinner thread because I basically want just texture in the back of this block, on the background of this block. And I wasn't getting that, and I was really bummed out. And then it finally dawned on me the reason that background stitching is so obvious and so in your face is because in my regulated mode, the stitch length is too long. So I'm moving my hands faster than what I have my stitch speed set for. So I'm getting these super long stitches. So I should have stopped and increased the speed that my machine was stitching at to give me shorter stitches. But that thought didn't dawn on me until after I completed it. But just know that thin thread and teeny tiny stitches will hide the actual stitching. It'll give you beautiful texture without being able to see the thread, which in this case, this is the first block that I've done in a long time, totally free motion. And the circles around my pebbles, they're not one on top of the other. They're not as good as I would like them to be. So the idea was just to hide them, which was the idea behind the 100 weight thread, that I could hide my not so perfect stitching. But because my stitch length is too long, it didn't quite work out. So just know, shorter stitch length, matching thread, thin thread, the thinner your thread, the more of a texture effect you'll get, especially on the high loft battings. And in the backgrounds, that's what I like. I like to see texture in the backgrounds, not so much the actual stitching. So where this block turned out beautiful, if I were to do it again, I would use a more contrasting thread, a darker thread for the heart and the flower and the feathers. And I would clean up my cross hatching. And I would increase the speed on my non-regulated stitching here in the background to make those stitch lengths shorter, so that background texture would just more or less disappear. The stitching itself, the thread itself, would disappear into the background. But other than that, so why am I showing you all my flaws? Because the whole point is, look, at this block turned out beautiful. And I'm sure a lot of your quilting that you think is less than perfect is actually quite beautiful, especially if you're not looking at it from 6 inches away. Most things you look at from across the room, or definitely from several feet away. So let it be this point in time and be okay with it. A few years down the road, you'll be better. A few years back, you were worse. So just go with it. So again, thank you for watching. I appreciate you putting up with my ramblings. Leave your comments. I love your comments. So thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Bye-bye.